You can call it the blues. You can call it down in the dumps. Call it depression. Call it anything you want to call it. But when it hits you like a Big Mac truck. What does the gospel have to say about all of that? What do the songwriters have to say? For years, they've been trying to say things like, hold on, my child, joy comes in the morning. Songs like, I'm not going to worry, I'm not going to fret. Songs like, keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Thank God for the promise of spring. I love this one. Farther along, we'll know all about it. Farther along, we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother. Live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. Gloria and I are here today with our good friend Marty Grubbs, pastor in Oklahoma City, longtime friend, and we're going to talk about depression. What does the gospel have to say about it? What do good gospel songs have to say about it? What do the hymns have to say about it? It's going to be a lot of fun. Hang on. I'm going to sing just as long as it takes for a song to make sad, happy spirits, heavy spirits free, okay? I'm going to keep making music that carries a secret that Jesus is liberty. I sing this every night, but I got to look at the teleprompter to make sure I get the words right. I'm going to turn off the sounds that would drag people down to the pit of despondency. With a sweet, happy tune, he is coming soon for his children like you and me. And you did that after 9/11, or I think you and I were saying, what are we going to do? It was a pretty sad time, wasn't it? Yeah. We were depressed.
Yeah, we could have picked several times. It wouldn't have maybe been 9/11, and because it seems like the cycle goes around and sad times come.
Sad times
they come.
Do come. So back to whatever we want to call it, the blues, down in the dumps, depression. And today we are joined by a wonderful friend that we have known since you've been a little puppy, Marty.
Long time.
Back in Kingsport, Tennessee. Your dad was pastoring there, and the trio in the early days would come. You and your brother Joey would have been what? 7 and 9 or 10?
Mm-hmm. Something like that. We moved to Ohio when we were 7 and 9, so we were 6 or 7.
You little guys.
Little, yeah. I remember it, though.
And we have stayed in touch with this wonderful family ever since. 40 years ago, after you got out of college, you went down to Oklahoma City as a minister of music. And was going to do that the rest of your life.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And it was the guy that hired me. The reason I went to Oklahoma was my youth pastor in high school was the pastor of the church. Mm-hmm. I would never have probably given it much attention, really. But so I went to see him, and then 14 months later, he left.
Yeah.
And so now they need me to do interim.
Yeah.
Which is code for we can't afford anything else, just do something. So I preached some of Swindoll's greatest books for about 9 months, and then another pastor came and stayed 2 years to the day, and then left. And then after the second pastor left, they figured out I either need to leave so a pastor will stay, or they can give it to me and let me try it. So God was in it and had a plan that would have frightened us from the beginning, but it's been quite a journey.
I love that you call yourself the accidental pastor.
Very much, very much.
And Marty, I know you and you're being very humble, but God has blessed your tenure there, and those 4 or 5 years have developed into 40 years. You have a wonderful work there, and Gloria and I follow your Sunday morning services, and I'm not saying this because you're here, but about a 30-minute sermon, I look at Gloria and I say, boy, he rings a bell. But you especially rang the bell for us a few months ago when you were doing a series of sermons. Mm-hmm. But you got to the topic of depression. Whether we want to admit it or not, it's a serious issue, right?
Yeah, very serious. And I think we underestimate it when it hits us. And I think part of the issue for us is we have to give it time to differentiate what is it. Is it sad? You can be sad but not depressed.
Yeah.
You can be grieving the loss of a loved one but not necessarily depressed. You can be just overwhelmed with guilt because of failures you've made. Those things come and they go. When you know you're depressed, it comes and it stays. And then you have to really make some wise decisions. A lot of people don't. They try to medicate themselves. I'll figure out what makes me feel better, and most of those choices aren't good ones.
Aren't good choices.
And I think it's always important to do two things: see a counselor and see a doctor. And that's when I ran into it 30 years ago, probably 20 years ago. Probably the smartest decision I made at that moment was call a doctor and call a counselor. And they worked together to decide, because I had no reason to be depressed. There was zero reason. It was it's kind of like Elijah in 1 Kings 18 and 19. Elijah had just had part of the most inspiring, exciting day of his life when he prayed down fire on the wood that had been doused with water, and God showed up. He calls on the name of God, and God shows up. The prophets of Baal, their God never showed up because he doesn't exist. That had to be the highest moment of his life. He had to step back and go, that was cool. Whatever that sounds like in Hebrew, that God did that. And yet, within hours, Jezebel had threatened to kill him. If she could get a hold of him in 24 hours, she was going to kill him. And that's all it took, and he's running for his life as if there was no hope. Goes out and hides in a cave. And
Terry Bradshaw has been very open about his depression. In fact, he's written a book on it. And he loves gospel music, especially loves the Isaacs, and made a record with Jake Hess. But it was fun talking with him, and he said, I could win the Super Bowl on Sunday, and on Tuesday night, I'd be drinking because the depression was so bad. So, and I think it's great when people at this level simply say, hey, this is real. Even people of faith, depression is depression. Let me say this. For us in the field of gospel music, we've tried to do our best to hit it. I think Suzanne wrote this lyric, our daughter, and Woody wrote the music. Woody Wright wrote the music. I'm not going to worry, and I'm not going to fret. I'm not going to speculate or contemplate on what hasn't happened yet. I won't let it haunt me. I won't let it win. I'm not going to ruminate or meditate on how it might have been. I'm going to release it. He's got the whole thing in his hand. Now, as a pastor, how many times have you seen, the altar is very important in our tradition, right, Marty?
Yeah.
People come forward and pray at an altar, and they give it to God.
Yeah.
And they release it.
As best they can. They really do put it in his hands. And I think it's important. The psalmist has said so much about this. And in fact, I think you mentioned Mark Lowry's comment, I think. What was that?
The theologian Mark Lowry, once upon a time said, David, everybody wants to quote his positive lines, oh, bless you, Lord, I love you. But 90% of the Psalms is like, oh, God, where are you? Mark says he was up one day, down the next, up one day. Had he had Prozac, there would not been any Psalms.
No. That's pretty good. But, this Psalm 40 in particular, I waited patiently for the Lord to help me. And he turned to me and he heard my cry, And I think what I say to people who've either been diagnosed or they're sensing they're dealing with some depression, it just takes time. You really, and you wait patiently, and you do the right thing, and you really have to, you have to apply yourself to a plan. Whether it's the counselor once a week, the doctor once a month, whatever the physician says, maybe a pastor, maybe a mentor, maybe a hero. We see a lot of people coming through our Celebrate Recovery and recovery ministries, the counseling center, who were very willing and eager to leave it in God's hands. They just didn't know how. And one thing that God has blessed us with is a church that can handle truth. We can tell the truth, and we call it what it is. And it just works so much better if we not try to hide it, and pretend like we're not depressed or that we're not sad or that we're not having a tough day. We're not going to pretend. And so that's helped build, I think the atmosphere of the church is such that people feel the freedom to talk about it.
To be honest.
To be honest. And invariably, when somebody says they'll say, I'm dealing with this, and invariably there's somebody around that puts an arm around them and says, I've been there too. How about we have lunch, or let's walk together in this. I've been there, so let me walk with you while you go through this. And so it's a journey. I say when I faced it the first time, it was a very, I would say mild, but it was real. And I'm thankful that I haven't had a chronic situation. Many people do.
Yeah.
And it's something we need to pay attention to.
I can remember one time telling Dr. Archibald Hart, who has written a lot of books on depression, good Christian theologian, and I told him, I said, I've dealt with depression myself. I think maybe every artist has, with the exception of you. I don't think you've seriously dealt with depression. But when our kids were teenagers, becoming young adults, I'm a hands-on kind of manager. And once your kids become teenagers and young adults, you can't.
It doesn't work.
It just doesn't work. And there were nights when Gloria and I would go to bed, and she would lie on my shoulder, and we'd both just tears running down her face. And I told Dr. Hart, I said, I've experienced depression, but evidently mine was not clinical because I didn't have to take any medication. To which he said, don't kid me. I said, what are you saying? He said, your work is your medication. And you're sitting in the room. Or we have taped, hundreds, maybe thousands of musical episodes. And to go into the studio and put the right pictures, when I see these pictures come up on the screen, and the right words and the right music, you can go day and night doing that. So it's real. And I couldn't help but think, when you were talking about people going through this and coming to the altar and wanting to leave it there, there's an old black gospel writer, I think he pastored in Philadelphia, Charles Tinley. He wrote By and By, When the Morning Comes, another song on perspective, cheer up, But he wrote this too. So he must have had some kind of psychology background and to write this. Leave it there. Leave it there. Take your burdens to the Lord and leave it there. If you'll trust, I think he had originally written, and never doubt. We weren't quite comfortable with that, so we put, if you'll trust him through your doubts.
That's good. That's much clearer.
If you never doubt, that leaves me out.
Yeah.
He will surely bring you out. There are no easy fixes. We believe very much in the altar, and we believe very much in the miracle of God. But good things take time, and a lot of us have to go through the process and get through it.
Marty, you mentioned, I'd like to hear what you have to say about, we all have sad times, usually related to something that's happening in our lives, and we can figure out, okay, I'm sad because. Right. But people that suffer from depression, it comes to you, and the cloud just lowers over you. And people will say, well, you need to do stuff. You need to go out and see people. You need to make sure you're not alone too much. You need to. But my experience with people with depression is that they have to look up to see the bottom. That's and right. They can't go do whatever you're telling them to go do. What is your experience?
Well, I think it's so easy to, you just want to go into a dark closet and close the door and not come out.
Go in bed and keep the just covers over your head.
Go to bed and, and assume that if how crazy we're thinking sometimes. In depression is we assume we can, if we lay here long enough, we'll feel better, when really we won't. Mm-hmm. It's good to get rest. You've got to go through those things. Elijah was hiding out in a cave. And I think, what came to my mind when you were saying that is, Elijah's running, he'll sleep, he runs, he'll sleep, and he ends up in a cave. And that's the great passage of Scripture in 1 Kings 18:19, where there was an earthquake. but God wasn't in the earthquake. And then there was a fire, and God wasn't in the
He
fire.
was in the fire.
But then there was a gentle whisper, and God was in the whisper. And so the good thing, I guess, about sitting still occasionally, if you'll give God a chance, if you'll truly trust him, it will make you feel better right now sometimes. It's not instant. We want everything fixed today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to
Instantly.
take a pill, do something that'll make me feel better now. And we have to learn in all the journeys of life, it's going to take time. It just takes time to get through them. And when you that episode with Elijah and the earthquake and the fire and the gentle whisper is toward the end of that time. And he heard the gentle whisper, and then everything turns right there. When the God says, Elijah, you're not the only one left. I've got 7,000 people back home waiting for you to come lead them. You're not the only one. So you go back the way you came, and let's get back to work. And that who knows all the timing and how long that took. But I've always loved that moment where Elijah is just sitting still, and all of a sudden something's getting his attention. And so many of us expect God in the earthquake or in the fire that we miss. When he really speaks, which is a gentle whisper, and you got to be quiet. You got to hush long enough to listen, and you'll hear that whisper. And something special can happen, but it takes a while.
What causes the depression to start? Is it life is overwhelming? Is it what makes that cloud descend? Is it powerlessness? Like you feel like life is too big, you can't take it on? What?
For me, it was 1999, and our little church had seriously, we just talked about it. We had our 60th anniversary as a church a couple of years ago, and we just prayed for 200 people because we had 200 seats. We thought, wouldn't that be great? And so by 99, there's probably 1,200 people now coming to the church. We're having 5 services in this little room, and we're building a new building to make room. And so I was so consumed that whole year. I think what happened for me is I felt like, I wasn't thinking much about, I didn't give God a chance to speak to me in those moments. I just was running fast. I learned that, you knew my dad. Dad was just, Dad was a guy, he'd light the torch, lift it and say, now follow me and don't ask questions, And so I'm not much that kind of a leader, but I knew I was just, I think I owned every little aspect of this move. 1,200 people in a room that would seat 400 out to a room that would seat 2,500. And you go through all the things of what if they don't come. But I think I got too wrapped up in thinking I had to solve every little piece of that puzzle. And what happened was you get exhausted, your brain gets tired, your body gets tired. And then we had this magnificent day where we celebrated the grand opening of this building. Phenomenal day. And it was the next morning when I woke up. And I thought, something's wrong. I couldn't figure out at first what it was. Something's wrong. And I think I think Sunday night after the big day, I went home and probably relaxed. And all of a sudden I realized I had a life, had a different life than what I'd been running, not from, but trying to control every aspect, I think, and make it perfect. I'm a perfectionist, and I wanted it all to be perfect, and I went too far with it. And I think we wind down physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. We catch ourselves. We forget. We know that if we, if we do too much with this, we're going to get cancer. It can cause cancer. If you smoke, you're going to get lung cancer or the variety of things that cause these various diseases. We don't think about if we don't slow down here, we're going to get a different kind of cancer. Okay. It's one of the emotions in the mind. It's called depression.
Both of you, I'm sitting here listening to both of you talk about it, and both of you in some way said, I thought I was in control. And when I lost control or came up to something that I could not control, then emotionally things crashed down. Our friend Marty also knows Ann Smith that we've talked to on one of these lady. Already. She's 94?
96.
96. And she's sharpest person I know.
Yeah.
But she said people get into trouble because they let go of things they should hang on to.
That's right.
And hang on to things they should let go of.
Leave it there.
Leave it there.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Leave It There is, like Bill said, for me, that was a difficult song because I leave it there a lot of times. I leave it there over and over and over and over and over. And I leave it there one wonderful night and I pray and say, God, I'm giving this to you. I'm relinquishing all the control. And I wake up in the next morning and it's in my hands.
Take it back. Yeah.
So I don't, the take the burden to your Lord, I can do. Leave it there, not so easy.
It's pretty hard. You made a comment. You wrote in your blog once about you were writing about the song you wrote, "I Then Shall Live," and there's a paragraph, and I wanted to be sure I didn't forget it, so I've written it down. And you wrote this when you were talking about "I Then Shall Live." If we looked at the problems of the world and our personal challenges as a whole, we would be paralyzed by the immensity of it all. And I think there's so much more going on, and we forget that, and then we try to own it and control it,
Too much.
and we can't do it. We have to leave. We have to leave it there.
If someone came to you and said, "What do I do first?" and they've been, depressed, like a cloud has moved in and just, is dampering you down, what do they do?
Well, they've got to start talking.
Talk to
They
somebody.
need to talk to somebody, preferably a counselor that understands and knows how to gently lead. We have a counseling center in the church with 5, 6, 7 counselors, and they're busy. And that, to me, was a part of the key to our church. Was a lot of people start there and have to deal with baggage or deal with things or hurts or hang-ups or habits that have destroyed them, or things they don't know why they feel like they do. But it starts with talk to somebody. Just quit thinking that you can't tell somebody that you might be depressed.
Didn't the church sort of promote that if you
We did.
if you had a problem and you had to see a psychologist or somebody to help you through your thinking, that you weren't spiritual?
Oh, sure. And I remember it's happened recently in the last few years, but I think of my parents who just had a tough marriage. It was a tough marriage for them. And yet, had they gone to counseling when they first realized they needed some help or were
Early on.
he might have lost his job. He might have been fired. And that happened not that long ago in another church, this day and age, when a pastor said to the board, to his elders, I don't know him personally, I read this, it was a news story, that he let them know he was dealing with some depression.
Yeah.
And he needed to back away for maybe a few weeks. And they fired him and didn't feel he could lead. And so that's the absurdity at times of the church. When we think that just reinforces this thing, I can't be honest.
Yeah.
In other words, don't take it to the altar and leave it there. Don't take it there to begin with. And one of my pet peeves as a pastor is a lot of people think they've rejected Jesus, but they really never met him. They just met a really lousy representative of Jesus. But they didn't walk away from Jesus, because if they had really met the real Jesus, the one that loves unconditionally and will walk with us through anything.
And tell us the truth.
And tell us the truth and not give up on us, But they've met a Jesus that was ticked off. And so I would have walked away from that Jesus too.
They should.
Well, they should, absolutely. So, and they have. But now it's tough when those of us who know the real Jesus would like others to know them. And it takes a little more time to help people understand just how much they're loved by the one who made them. There's a line in I Then Shall Live, well, it's the opening verse. And on my toughest day, somehow I gravitate to this phrase. I then shall live as one who's been forgiven. I've been so loved that I'll risk loving too. Those words are I am his child and I'm not afraid. It reminds me, and I've got this thing on, as you know, I've got this thing, I had somebody paint it it's on my wall in this, on canvas, so I can see it. And it's just one of those among many other songs that I've grown up with. I've grown up with all the songs,
You sure have.
the best songs in the world, still are.
Writing that, it's interesting that you pick that first line, because in writing it, I thought, I then shall live as one who's been forgiven. And what does that look like?
In the next phrase,
So the rest of almost the whole song is like, if I believe that I've been forgiven, what does that look like?
I'll walk with joy to know my debts are paid.
What should be the result in my personal day? And I say this is a song that was way easier to write than it is to live.
Yeah.
Because there are words I have to I think I want to come back to it, unless you get an eternal perspective on things. I think the values we get depressed. One of the things I think is that we accept the values that are around us and say, I'm not measuring up. I'm not successful. I'm not popular. I'm not rich. I'm not cute. I'm not charming, whatever the standards are. Okay, so how do you get out? And that depression, and I never will be. I'm going to have this face no matter what I do. I'm going to have this hair no matter.
It's a beautiful face.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a good sunny side look at it.
Yeah, but you have to understand,
You don't see well.
You've got to understand, as my good friend Carl Erskine's wife told him, said, you're so beautiful. And she says, that's because you're looking through Grandpa's eyes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But coming back to, I think until we can, that's why you are important, not just a psychologist or not just a counselor, but what you do, Marty, is to help people see another value structure, which is eternal. What really matters? If you're going to die tomorrow, you're probably not going to say, well, I sure wish I'd worked more. I wish I'd put more hours in at the office. If you're going to die tomorrow, you probably aren't going to say, well, I wish I'd done 2 more style shows than I did. Whatever your value structure. If you, as a pastor, can help people turn their values upside down, which is what I tried to do in the song. It's like, okay, what does that look like? And nothing in this song is going to be able to say, then you'll be richer, you'll be more popular.
You'll not have depression.
You won't have depression. Because you might, because the collision of the world's values and eternal values are going to keep colliding.
Human beings have put their faith in things that we now have found out are really fragile, more than we thought, far more than we thought.
Yeah.
And the upheaval of the political world and economies come and they go. And, we had an ice storm out in our part of the country and with the worst cold snap we've ever had, I think, in the history of Texas and Oklahoma. And all of a sudden, Texans are realizing that power grid failed us. They didn't have power for a week. Well, I think things like that, we're realizing we're not bulletproof here.
Right.
No matter what we do to protect ourselves and build these houses, whatever we do to try to make everything right and build that fortress that's going to protect us, it's just not going to work. It will for a while, but it's fragile. It has its weak moments. And I think it's important for us to understand that this life will never dish us up the steady meal of what's going to matter. And I love life. I love that I'm an American. I love that I live in Oklahoma. I love that I grew up in Ohio and came to school in Indiana. I love that I grew up in church, all those things. But it's all pointing us toward the one that gives us hope. And that's why, to me, I think knowing Jesus, just focusing on, we call ourselves a Christ-centered church. Yeah. Because he gave us exactly what we needed, and it was as good today. It's as good today as it was then.
And Jesus really went to the issue of the problem. Any problem he encountered. The man at the pool of Bethesda.
That's right.
Been there many, many years. And I think this fits into what we're talking about.
It's the biggest question.
Because I've heard you preach on it. First of all, in any kind of problem, I don't care what it is, the question you really have to ask yourself is, to be well. Now, from the outside, that would really, we talk about the sweet, gentle, kind Jesus. That was pretty much in your face kind of Jesus. I mean, the guy had been sitting there for how many? 38
38 years.
Yeah. And he was sick, really bad sick. And the first question Jesus asked him is, do you want to be well?
Do you want me to remove the excuses?
Yeah. And he didn't stop there. He said, if you really want to be well, you're going to have to get up off your backside and go show some faith on your own. And I think when we're talking about depression or any kind of illness, we have to ask ourselves seriously the question. I think there are a lot of people, I want to be careful, I don't want to paint it with a broad brush, but I think there are some people who kind of enjoy their sickness.
Oh, the commentaries on that question, do you want to be well? One in particular, it may have been Tony Evans, says the question Jesus was posing to this man was, are you ready for the responsibilities you're going to have the minute you can walk?
The minute you go on.
Because when you can walk, suddenly it's going to be on you now.
Yeah.
To take care of your daily food, or to get where you need to go, or are you prepared for all that comes with
To act as a
getting
whole person.
well?
Yeah.
And I think that's a great question. That's a gift from Jesus for all of us. Do we really want to be well and accept what comes with that? There's a lot of good that comes with it, but there is responsibility that comes with it.
Mm-hmm. Are you willing to take up your mat? What is your mat? What is it that is the comfortable part of being dysfunctional? Because then you're not expected to be functional. And I love the line when she said, are you used to your chains? Are you attached to your pain?
So attached to the pain, yeah.
And I think one of the big things in dealing with depression is playing the victim.
Yes.
Like, I can't help it. My mother did this, my dad did this, my ex-wife did this, or whatever the thing is, my dad made all these mistakes, and all that may be true, and that may be stuff that a counselor will have to help you walk through. But through is the functioning word here. Do you really want to get through it? We have another song that said, I call it one of our tiny little songs, and it's just called Through. And we wrote it because if I had to pick one word from, 40 years of letters, the word would be through. Your music helped us through. Yeah. And that's strategic, because it didn't go under or around and avoid the whatever through was. God has promised to walk us through it. I've asked audiences, and I bet you have too, how many of you grew the most, got the most insights, became more like Christ when things were really going well? You were in, problem-free, like one or two hesitant hands. How many of you grew the most, got more insight into life, expanded your horizons, found more joy when it was the most painful? Everybody, So, wow. What is your mat?
That'll preach. That's really good. And I think I look back on November of 1999 when I got a dose of it. I got to taste a little depression, and it made like I said, it made no sense. Nothing could have been better in my life. Yeah. God blessed me with a wife that I didn't deserve then and still don't. She's just a gift. She just, and so I very happy marriage, and this
great kids.
incredible
Great
woman
kids.
and kids that love Jesus, and yet I was in this dark place. But I think it's that's the question. Are we going to get up? Are we going to get up and move, or just we're going to lay there and take it? Because that won't solve anything. But I think God used that moment. I mean, it was like mid-November 1999, and we had just walked into this 2,500 seat auditorium, And we
That's a great room to sing.
it's a great room.
We've been there
Yeah.
several times.
Yeah, we built it in mind for worship. You know, worship's still my love.
Yeah.
And we have three different worship styles every Sunday morning in 3 different rooms.
Yeah.
But I think God decided in mid-November, that I'm going to help you, Marty. I'm going to send you through something that's going to change so much about the way you see ministry and
Absolutely.
your role. Because I've got something in mind for this room that you're thinking, if it's full once, wouldn't that be amazing in your lifetime? And I'm going to give you a reason to talk to people at a level they've not been talked to, and get honest with people. And what happened in that room that day was just the beginning, when God said, I've got bigger plans yet again than he did in 1980.
And you're not going to make them happen.
And you won't make them happen, and you can't stop them, and you need to quit trying to control it and just let me do my thing.
That's beautiful.
Your brother is a medical doctor. And I heard you refer to him. First of all, for you who are trying to figure out who is this guy and what's your relationship here, we love this family, okay? And it's been so great to see wonderful growth that for whatever reason, your life was a lot like our life. God just looked down and said, I think I can bless these 2 people. And I think
That mess.
and I look, only 2 kids in your family, you and your brother is a very successful doctor. He started out in LA, right?
Yeah.
I love the fact that he wanted to pick up his family. I want to go be with my brother. And if you want to see 2 brothers, here's this medical doctor with a great practice. He's up there Sunday morning singing to the praise and worship team, just singing to the glory of God, loves Jesus. And I think that's a great story within itself. But here again, I got ADD, and so I got sidetracked. But what does he say about how do you combine the science with the whole faith issue? How do you combine the science with Jesus? Because there'll be critics out there saying, no, all you need is the trip to the altar. And I don't want to put that trip to the altar. I'm a result of many trips to the altar. I think that is very, very important.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you were so kind to look at science as a person of faith and say, this is important. So what does your brother say?
Well, Joey makes the comment, I think, that I called him and asked him several questions as I was preparing that message, and he just made a comment that it's important to see a physician and see a trustworthy, a good physician. Not that not all of them maybe have experience with certain things, but my brother's not one that likes to immediately just throw medication at it. Let's just find a pill to fix this, and that's all we'll do. So he really gave us quite a list of things that, from a physician standpoint, we need to consider. One is just not just the feeling we have in the moment, but even our physical health, emotional health, mental health, and to zero in on the whole picture of your life, your body. And it's important for us to understand that when we say we want to be well, there's layers to that. Mm-hmm. Picking up that mat, the mat's got a lot of stuff on it.
Yes.
And so I think from a physician standpoint, Joey treats it. He understands it. He understands different medications can do different things, and there are times you may have to try 3 or 4 different ones that works for your body chemistry and all that. But there are times it's important. The way it was described to me, I remember Joey saying on an antidepressant, when I was thinking, should I take this? Is this going to make me crazier than I already am?
Yeah.
And he said, Marty, there's a chemical that there's a switch in the brain that is supposed to make this chemical. And it's the chemical of your feelings and emotions. And sometimes that gets out of whack. And for whatever reason, the switch flipped off. So we're going to use the benefit and beauty of medicines in this day and age. We're going to flip the switch back on. And then we're going to find out, will it stay on? And then if it does, we'll wean back off the medication. If it doesn't stay on, we'll stay on the meds until it does. And that helped me a lot to understand that there's a physical issue. It's truly a physical thing that happens in the body that triggers this.
Just say more about the circle of people around you to get you whole.
You know, we think back on some times in our life where we made mistakes we regret. And typically it's because we were around people that pulled us down, or we were going along with them, or they were going along with us. And it's some of the foolishness of our youth. But I've learned you have to have people around you who know you well, but love you in spite of how well they know you. You know, still love you. It's the line, and I am loved. I am loved. I can risk loving you, for the one who knows me best loves me most. Well, how amazing is that? When you think about Jesus knows me better. He knows every stupid thing I've ever done, every stupid thing I've ever thought. He knows that at 62, I can sometimes think like a 13-year-old. And he knows all this. And he still loves me. The one who knows me best loves me most. So we want to be around people that just love us. And they're not going to try to fix us. I think one of the most important things sometimes I've done for people in trouble or who were sick or troubled is just be with them, but don't say anything.
And
Just
you know
sit there.
what? That is really tough when the person, it can be a friend or could be family, and when they are saying things that are pushing you clear to the edge, with anger and really acting like a jerk. At that point, I have to come back. The most popular gospel song ever is Amazing Grace, How Sweet the Sound. We understand grace from the here. We don't understand grace from here. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I think you've got to bite your tongue and you got to say, I don't care what you say. I love you. And I'm going to be here, and you can push me as far as you want to push me. And until you push me, just and close the door, I'm going to be here, because that is tough.
I think about, you need somebody in your life that calls you to something higher.
That's right.
That sees in you something you don't see in yourself. Right. And say, you're better than that. I see something in you greater than that. And they won't give up.
Right.
I have to go back to Anne again, who said her prayer for the decade was, God, help me see what you intended when you made, let's say, Marty. Let me see what you intended when you made Marty. And let me treat him as if that has already happened.
Oh, that's great.
Wow.
Wow.
You know, that's the person that refuses to accept your estimation of yourself. No, you're greater than that. And I'm not going to stop until you see what I see. And what God is revealing, that your gifts are, and look at that as a child. I mean, if you could call out of every child their potential, I mean, there would be no stopping.
You know, what I'm hearing both of you saying here is, we're talking about depression. But you're saying that maybe the statement's right. It does take a village to raise a child. At that point, our village is worship. I never forget, in this room, when we were introducing loving God, loving each other, and the first time through, they all kind of were looking at 200 people in this room. And the second time through, loving God, loving it, pretty soon you can see those old, rough bass singers.
You're leaving out.
Hey, buddy, yeah. You getting that kind of, that's called worship. That's called community. I mean, Jesus said, forget not the assembling of yourself together. And boy, when I think of the worship that's happened in this room, when they start singing, loving God, loving it, I think that could help some depression. Don't you?
I have no doubt.
This is the 50th anniversary of Because He Lives.
Oh, it is?
We wrote it 50 years ago.
Oh, goodness.
About our baby, you know.
Yeah.
We were
In really troubled times.
in really troubled times. So if any song ought to give the folks hope, this ought to give you hope, because history has revealed this world's never been very stable.
No.
I mean, this last year has been as crazy as it can get. But you read history,
Right.
there's been crazier times.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So we wrote it and probably have got more emails. I'm back in the card and letters business. People write cards and letters.
Yeah.
Thank you for the song. And here again, they would say, it got us through a difficult time.
People just need a little hope.
Need a little hope. Loss. We live in a culture that says we're winners, 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 winners. We don't ever lose. I mean, we have not developed a good theology or psychology or a philosophy for loss. And the minute we come out of the womb, we're going to be dealing with loss one way or the other, And especially when it comes to the loss of life. Mm-hmm. At 59 years old, my brother died of cancer. It was not an easy time. And just a year or so later, my mother died. And then just last, or not last spring, but 4 or 5 years ago, it seemed like this last spring, lost my sister. Mm-hmm. She always sang this song, and she loved it. Thank God, and I still got her on my voice. She called me and couldn't get me, so she said, "Bill, thank God for the promise of springtime." She thought she was going to whip that cancer, leukemia. Once again, my heart will sing. There's a brand new day dawning. Thank God for the promise of spring. Those are real moments in our lives where we have to say goodbye to the people whom we love dearly.
Though the earth seems bleak and barren, and the seeds lay brown and dead, the promise of life throbs within them. And I know spring is just ahead.
If I did believe that, Marty, I wouldn't want to be competing against the guy who did believe that.
That's right. That's right.
Because depression is real.
Yeah.
And there are times when you think, is spring ever going to come? So if this session doesn't do anything for people, I hope it encourages people to say, you're not the first person who's been there. You're not the first person who's dealt with loss.
And don't accept it as the norm. Don't just assume you have to just live with it.
Yeah.
There's some hope and there's ways to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Don't give up.
You're right. They take time to trust the time, trust the process through. You're going to get through.
Maybe that is still the most important word.
Yeah.
People say, what's your favorite song? And without batting an eye, I always say, I didn't write it. It's my favorite song. Through it all.
Oh, yeah.
Through it all.
Yep.
I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God. Through it all.
Yeah.
Through it all. I have learned to depend upon His Word. And that might sound like an easy answer or fix for depression. But when we finally move to trust, it's not a bad place to live, right?
Mm-mm. You know that I love the verse, simple verse. If Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless.
Yeah, what's the point? Like,
Useless.
what's the point?
Just
if
useless.
the resurrection is not true, and not just in one time in history.
Right?
Jesus' resurrection personified what's built into the whole universe. Life wins.
Yeah.
Life will push through. I've got some pile of leaves this deep. This is Indiana, right? So I rake all the leaves on my gardens. And I've got this thick pile of leaves, and right out my window where I sit, these tiny little fragile star flowers that have stems that look like hair shoved that whole pile of
Up through
leaves
the
out of
leaves.
the way, and they're just all over the place. And some of them have leaves hanging on, dripping down, but oh no. Life wins. Those dead leaves,
Yeah.
not a chance. Not a
That's
chance.
When Gloria and I started writing, we had 2 or 3 writers that just really had a big influence on us. Ira Stampfield, who wrote probably one of the best anti-depression songs ever.
Yeah.
Many, many things about tomorrow I don't seem to understand. But I know who holds tomorrow, and I know who holds my hand. I love it because, first of all, he's being honest, like you're trying to do at your church. Many things, I don't understand this. And when somebody comes up to me and they've lost 2 or 3 or 4 loved ones close to them, I have to say, I don't understand. You know, I've never been there, and I don't know. I mean, the question why has been around forever. And if you allow those things, the devil will take those, and you get so depressed and so down. But here again, the old gospel writers, many things about tomorrow to encourage you. He was a big influence. Stuart Hamlin. The things of earth will dim and lose their value if we'll recall they're just borrowed for a while. And things of earth that cause the heart to tremble, remembered there, will only bring a smile. Here again.
But until then.
My heart will go on. You know, I'm back again. I got to say, if I didn't believe that, I hate to compete against the guy. Because you can't beat him or her down. You know, I mean, you know, if they believe it. So Stuart was such a big, big influence on our lives. And then Mosey Lister.
Oh, wow.
And Mosey was interesting because back in the 50s, I thought he was just a fun writer. He wrote all these fun tunes for quartets. Brother, let me tell you how I feel. Happy rhythm. There's a happy rhythm, keeps it rocking and a rolling. He's the first rock and roller going. But he's a lot like David. He had his great days, and when Gloria and I started looking at his lyrics, we say, this man was interesting, because with all of this optimistic stuff, he wrote songs like Till the Storm Passes By, and then this lyric, like a king I may live in a palace so tall, with great riches to have my own. And here's the line, but I don't know a thing in this whole wide world that's worse than being alone. Hold my hand every day, every hour, all the way, from here to the great unknown.
That's powerful. All people needs a little hope. Just a little glimmer of hope that it's going to be okay. And I think that's why I think that's why worship is so important. I think that's why songs, you know, we remember seasons of our life by the songs. Yeah. Oh, that song! I remember that song. That one of our favorite songs when we first got married, or that was our favorite song growing up as a kid. Those words just say something. You know, they talk to us all of our life.
I can't get over the thrill of flying in dark climates and like in the wintertime, because the clouds cover here in Indiana is so thick. And you grew up in Ohio, so you know exactly what I mean. And it seems like, you know, you go forever to get up above the clouds, but I never get used to the thrill of bursting through the clouds.
Breaking through the clouds.
And seeing that, oh my wonder, the sun's been here all along, and the sun is on the shining down on the clouds, and they're below you. And there's something about that. To my spirit is an analogy to exactly what you've been talking about, Marty. And I think if we can just remind ourselves that the sun has been there all along.
All along.
And it's been 4 months since I've seen it, you know. But it didn't go anywhere. It didn't go anywhere.
That's great.
And eventually, the moisture that makes the clouds, the tears that make the clouds, the sun will burn through if we can be patient. And I always say, I feel sorry for those poor people in California because they don't ever know what we pay for spring.
Yeah.
Or Florida.
And there is no green like green when it's chartreuse and the edges of every little twig is pink. And you just think, it's going to burst any moment. The spring is spring after winter. So, if there's somebody out there who thinks the winter will never end, it won't rain always. It won't be cloudy always.
You know, one thing I've loved about the 12 steps, the guy that invited me to the first meeting, he didn't tell me we were going to a 12-step meeting. And I got there and I said, what are we doing? I don't drink. And he goes, yeah, but you're crazy. You need some help. So, okay. But and so use the analogy of the person that didn't know they couldn't handle alcohol, but they took the first drink, and it started there.
Yeah.
And then they started taking more. And even when they got pulled over and there was a DUI, well, I can deal with this. But they didn't. And it just hurt by hurt, mistake by mistake. We convince ourselves that this isn't going to hurt anybody.
We talk about depression coming all of a sudden, but usually it isn't all of a sudden. It may come all of a sudden. It may attack us like a tiger out of the wilderness. But if you start to deal with it and take it apart, there usually is a long history of things undealt with that will culminate in some kind of accidental invasion of depression. If you're overwhelmed with depression and then you say there's a history for this depression, you can't fix it. You know, you can't go back and relive your life or make your parents relive their lives or make your wife relive her life or, you know, whatever brought on the depression. But God can. He can walk back through all those rooms with you and meet you when it was happening. And I think of so many women who have been abused that I've worked with. It's like, where was God when I was a child? Where was he? He was there. He was there. And whether you knew it or not, he was holding you, and that is why you're here. So you get into trouble hurt by hurt, and you get out of it hurt by hurt too. But the thing is that God can go back to the healing moment and work his way forward.
Yeah, I wish I could help this our younger generation in the church. I'm always trying to help them understand there's a future. It's not all about right now. It's not all about this week. It's not all about this month or this year.
You're right.
If you would have a sense of vision of where your life is headed and think about it now while you're 20. Think about where do you see this life? Where do you want it to go? Because if you don't give any thought to that, then you're going to be like a pinball machine. You'll just go here, there, and everywhere, and you'll find yourself in your 40s wondering how you got there with no direction, no sense of purpose. And I'm writing a deal because it takes me forever to write anything, but I sat down and wrote what life was like for me, 22 when I moved to Oklahoma. At 22, I wish I'd done this. At 32, I wish I'd done that. At 42, how it would have been nice to have a little more patience. At 52, how nice it might have been to know that 60 was coming. And it's so those decades, these 4 decades, and it just when I look at the church, when I look at my own life, when I look at our family, it's one little decision at a time, and the good ones pay off so much over time. I'm telling people now, if I had known how good things could be after doing this do the right thing at the right time for the right reason and do it for a long time. And so, but we don't always do it right or at the right time for the right reason. And so I think that's the beauty of the song you've written, for example, because when that guy finally decides, it's clear I'm not handling the drinking. I didn't know how bad this was going to get when I had that first drink. Now I do.
Yeah.
Now I've got to go back to the beginning, and it's that step 1. It's just, I mean, what a brilliant thing. I've got to admit I can't fix this, and I'm going to need help getting it fixed. And that's that one hurt. You go back, and then you work your way till you believe that you're going to have help, and then you turn it over to God, and then you make amends. You go back, and you start repairing.
Whoa. Talk about that. We used to call that restitution. What is that?
Make amends?
Yes.
Well, you go.
Why is that so important?
Well, because healing can't be complete until you have also not just let Jesus restore your own soul, not that he's helped you deal with the damage and the wreckage and face it and acknowledge it and admit it and grieve it, but you have to also bring the people you hurt. You can't ignore that one. And that's maybe the hardest one. To go back to people
That's where
that
healing
you
comes.
hurt and say, I didn't realize how much I was hurting you, or how bad my actions were and how much they hurt you. You go back and you make amends. You can't go forward. If you're going to one hurt at a time and start repairing those things, you have to go back as best you can and repair the damage. And part of that's the relationships that got mortally wounded. And the step says, we made amends to those unless to do so would have been hurtful. Unless to do so would inflict more pain. There's some
pain.
people you need to leave it alone.
Okay, then you have to forgive yourself.
Yes.
Forgiveness is a big key in here. I hear you saying you got to be forgiven, and you've got to forgive the people that hurt you, and sometimes you can't go back to them.
No.
But you have to forgive them just the same.
That's right.
Like if they're gone, if they're dead, or if they're
Right.
unreachable, or, But forgiveness, I see a needle and thread sewing up a tear in the skin, and watching a doctor tie those little knots each time. That is how it'll heal right, or heal at all.
Yeah. The memory is a wonderful thing. And why do we forget what we wish we could remember and remember what we wish we could forget? And I think even though we may go through the steps, or the whatever the process is going to be that brings us to some wholeness in our life and getting through the dark moments, one of the things the enemy loves to do is remind us. It's done, it's forgotten, it's forgiven. But I try to help younger people now understand evil is always right there. And the enemy, the good old devil, will be wanting to remind you constantly, hey, remember that? Remember how silly you were? Remember what a loser you were in that moment? And I think it's so important for us to understand that is not the voice. That's the voice of evil. That's the voice of the enemy. This has been dealt with. It's been put away. It's been forgiven. There's no need to go back there. But I think the enemy wants to take us back there a lot. And so I have the same thing. I mean, I can be walking down the hall from the office down to the auditorium, and I've always joked that the minute I walk out of my office door, I think God says to the angels, hey, come here and watch this. You're not going to believe this one. And then all the way down, I can quickly go down this path of not that good. I mean, boy, he just comes right after you. You're not that good. You're not that smart. Remember when? And boy, what if these people knew? And it's amazing when I think the devil shows up and wants to take us back where we once were. And we have to be. I think pastors have to remember the people we have forgiven, the people we have proclaimed forgiveness for and told them about the joy of forgiveness. We got it too. We needed it and we received it. And I think we cannot forget that this is a done deal. It's over. Dad always told me, and he spoke from some experience. He said, Mario, there's a target on your back. The enemy's got a target on your back. He would love to do nothing more than stop whatever God has in store for you in Oklahoma City.
That's wisdom.
So just be mindful. The target is there. It's on your back. And another thing he said that's been very, very helpful was know what the target is. When he fires at you, what's he firing
gonna fire
at you?
Yeah.
What is it he knows
That's good.
will get you and have the most potential to mess you up.
And his timing is always perfect. And
Perfect.
it seems like it's always when you start to help somebody else.
That's right.
You may go to the altar and say, I want to pray with this person that, somebody there, your friend that you've invited to church or you had some influence on. And Satan will say, who do you think you are?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think you are?
I often I'll make a point to say when we might read a psalm, I may be reading something out of the Psalms. We'll go back to King David, and I think of David. I think of that woman at the well, who showed up a loser in the community at noon, and by the end of the day, most of the town had come to follow Jesus because of this woman's testimony. Most churches wouldn't let either one of those two teach Sunday school.
They couldn't be teaching a Sunday school
We
class.
wouldn't have them teach a Sunday school. We sure wouldn't let them on the board, not with their past. You know how we do that.
An old theologian, her initials are GG, wrote this: I repent for moments I have
Did
spent.
you have to say old?
I repent for moments I have spent recalling all the pain and failures of my past.
Yeah.
I repent for dwelling on the things beyond my power to change, the chains that held me fast. I will go on. There comes a time when you have got to get it in the past. You just said it. Jesus says, I forgive you, and I have forgotten it.
Why do we have so much trouble with that simple statement? I will forgive your sins and remember them no more.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're in the deepest of the sea, and then we go deep sea fishing.
That's exactly right.
We sing these songs every night, but we don't have the chance to say, are you listening?
Am I listening?
Am I listening? This could change your life. The old spiritual was right. It's me, it's me, it's me, oh Lord. Standing in the need of prayer. That'll help us get out of some depression, wouldn't it?
It will.
These are tough times. I mean, these times have torn families apart.
Oh, yeah.
And depression, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
And the political year that we've been through has torn families apart. And I've had people say, I keep playing that song over. Sometimes it takes a mountain, sometimes a troubled sea, sometimes it takes a desert to get a hold of me. Your love is so much stronger than whatever troubles me.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a mountain.
We are so consumed right now, I think, with this world and all it's dishing up.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's disappointing.
Yeah.
And we are so caught up in it. And I think it's unfortunate that we're letting all this temporary stuff take us down a path. And I guess you reap what you sow, because if we're going to depend on the world to give us whatever we think we need, it will always disappoint.
The
Always.
world didn't give it to me, and it can't
Can't
take
take it away. That's right.
And I know this is a serious subject, but just in case, I still come back to this hype and hope. Now, hope is a real thing. But every now and then, if you don't have any hope, you got to start somewhere. And if nothing,
I'm not sure I would say that.
probably I'll get some email. Don't bother writing me. I can't read them anyway. Okay, but at any rate, if I've got to be trapped in a bad problem with somebody, give me somebody who says, "Don't worry, it's going to get better. I believe something good is going to happen. I didn't write this song, but I love it. There's going to be a better day. There's going to be a better day. There steps to get there, hurt by hurt." This has not been a carefully planned out lesson on how to get out of depression, but we're just trying to share some practical experiences with a pastor who deals with it every day, and simply say, these are more than just songs. These are not just little ditties that we sing and do. It's going to be a better day. Now, my kids would say, Dad, you're the uncurable optimist.
That's good. We need you.
And you know what? I had a friend, Bob McKenzie. If the clock was 1 minute before midnight and it looked like we were in a mess we could not get out of, give me Bob McKenzie in my corner, because he'd say, you know what? Maybe, just maybe.
It's like, this is better. This is even better.
This is going to be better, you know. And somewhere between self-helps, and I believe in self-helps, and we've had, we've sung more than our share of songs. I still love that line, cheer up, My brother, live in the sunshine. And if you said, and if you just sang that without all the stuff that we have talked about, this is a serious thing. Mm-hmm. But there's hope. There is a better day. And probably the biggest thing that the Bible does for us is this. And let's go back to David. It helps us get it in perspective.
That's right.
That's the best gift my dad ever gave to me. I can remember him saying, I was worried about a problem that we had, and I just thought, we're never going to get through this. And he said, oh, Bill, it's probably not as bad as you think it is. And it probably wasn't as good as you thought it was. Now, is that wisdom?
That sounds like George Gaither.
Now, that's wisdom.
I think one of the greatest things we can do along life's journey, and particularly as we grow up and maybe grow a little older, is don't dread the valleys.
Yeah.
They'll come.
Yeah.
But you're going to learn something when you're there.
Perspective.
Yeah.
You will come out better for it like you did the last time.
Yeah.
And prepare for them. They'll come, but you'll get out of it just like you did the last time. That's how God works. He doesn't take us anywhere he's not going to waste our time. Yeah. He's not going to waste our experiences. Yeah. He'll take us where he wants to take us. But we learn the most in the valleys, so we can appreciate the mountain.
Well, Marty, you've mentioned your dad a couple times. The one quality that you got from your dad was optimism. He was optimistic about life, even in troubled times, and you have shared that. This has been great. We've been wanting to do this for a long time. How to apply practical theology to serious problems.
Yeah, I love you all so much. The music is astounding. It just is a gift that keeps giving, and all those songs, and they're just special.